All countries in the world are in debt. The United States is currently in about $38 trillion of debt, the highest figure in history. The European Union has around $14 trillion in debt. Japan is close to $9 trillion. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia or export-heavy countries like Germany and China carry enormous debts. Here's the interesting part. If all countries owe each other, who actually receives this money? To answer this, we need to look at financial history. When money, power, and history come together, nothing is that simple. Debt is not only a burden, it is the invisible architecture of today's world. Every war, every crisis, every economic event and collapse occurs on this web of debt. If you follow this chain far enough, you reach a strange truth. The whole world is not really indebted to anyone, it is indebted to itself. But this doesn't mean everyone shares equally. To understand how we reached a world with nearly 3 times the global economy in debt, like $315 billion, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before the first person used a credit card or digital transfers existed, the concept of national debt did not emerge from Wall Street, it emerged from wars. In 1694, England was at war with France, and its gold resources were nearly depleted. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for interest payments guaranteed by future taxes, they financed the crown. To manage this new system, the Bank of England was founded. This was the largest step ever taken. The state could now spend money it did not have. In return, the lenders received something money could not buy, a promise from the government, which could then be bought and sold. This was the birth of government bonds. The seeds of the modern financial system were planted. France imitated this. The Netherlands developed it further. Independent America adopted the same method to finance its revolution and expand westward. National debt was no longer a sign of failure, but a measure of reliability. The ability to borrow became a measure of governance. Old states conquered land to acquire gold. Now they issue bonds to earn interest. The battlefield is a balance sheet. Centuries later, debt became the world's most important export. The U.S. is $38 trillion in debt. Japan is $9 trillion. This borrowing continues at a rate of roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt, from banks lend to everyone. Every citizen through taxes, savings, and pension funds is both debtor and creditor. So who is at the end of this chain? We must start with the U.S., because it is not only in debt internally, but also globally. Half of this $38 trillion debt is publicly held, that is, owed to investors rather than government branches. About a third of these investors are American banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining $9 trillion is held abroad. Japan, starting with about $1 trillion, is followed by China with $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. It's not wrong to say the US owes China, but this is only about 2% of the total. Most US debt is owed internally. Treasury bonds are issued, purchased by banks and funds, often repurchased by the Federal Reserve, and in the process, new money is created. Citizens pay the interest through taxes, which flows back into American retirement accounts. This is a closed loop. Debt exists, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the system itself. This loop is not unique to the U.S., it is universal. When Japan lends a bit to the U.S. lends through the IMF to Europe, Europe through the World Bank to developing countries, and they, in turn, lend back to developed nations with their reserves. It's a global hot potato game. But in this game, the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another country's debt. Every promise is backed by another promise. It's like a poker table. Players exchange chips, and the only rule keeping the game alive is that no one leaves the table. There is a fourth layer. True power lies in the markets. Behind every government bond are institutions managing huge assets, hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. They are the real credit referees. They decide which countries can borrow cheaply and which must pay a premium. If they lose confidence, undesirable outcomes occur. Governments fall, economies are restructured overnight. Democracy chooses who governs. Markets choose who survives. The high priest of the modern financial system is the central bank. Central banks do not only manage debt, they create it. When the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys bonds, new money is generated. One balance sheet item becomes another's asset. Every dollar in the market is someone else's debt. There is no debt-free money. Every note, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. This cycle has continued for years on trust. If investors believe governments will pay interest, the system continues to function even if the principal's never repaid. But what if trust breaks? We saw an example in Greece in 2010. The government could not repay its debt. Bondholders panicked and interest rates skyrocketed. The European Central Bank and IMF intervened, bringing austerity, tax hikes, payment cuts, massive unemployment. An entire generation was impacted. Recurring defaults in Argentina turned debt into a national crisis. In Sri Lanka, government inability to pay loans led to fuel shortages and political collapse. When the system fails, creditors are exposed. IMF, rating agencies, and anonymous bondholders. After these collapses, logic starts over. New loans cover old debts are restructured. The system continues under a new name on the same balance sheet. Today, debt is designed not to be repaid but to be renewed. Governments do not plan to fully pay off their debts, now or ever. This is not a conspiracy, it is politics. When we borrow, we are expected to pay back the principal. Governments handle this differently. Debt is managed like a subscription. New bonds cover old debt. Economists call this refinancing. Interest is a tangible product, the price of stability. The global economy now relies on this rent. U.S. debt will never end. Japan has been renewing its debt for decades, now exceeding 250% of GDP. Yet Japanese bond yields are near zero. Investors are not waiting to be repaid. They are waiting to renew the agreement. Government debt is the safest collateral. U.S. Treasury bonds are an asset, not a liability, the foundation of global markets. Pension funds hold them. Banks use them as collateral. Central banks treat them as cash. The system is built on ever-present government debt. If governments paid off their debts, the world would lose its most reliable financial instrument. Washington, paying off all its debt would reduce money supply, causing deflation and collapse. Paying off debt destroys the engine that keeps the economy running. Instead, governments issue debt carefully and steadily. Debt is the heartbeat of capitalism, present in every pension fund, mortgage, and market. Politicians who talk about balancing budgets or paying off national debt are selling illusions. The goal is not to escape debt, but to keep it sustainable, payable, and trustworthy. Without trust, numbers are meaningless, interest soars, and a debt-based economy stops. The secret of sovereign debt, the plan is never to repay it fully, but to make the world believe it will. As long as trust persists, numbers can grow freely. But trust is not equally distributed. Interest payments do not flow evenly. They flow upward, from taxes and workers to institutions and investors holding the debt. Debt is not just international transfer, it's almost interclass transfer. Global inequality rises with debt. The system rewards debt holders, punishes payers, not out of malice but by design. From households to countries, from countries to the planet, creditors benefit, debtors fuel the engine. Problems begin when the engine runs out of fuel. New debt cannot cover old promises. Then the question, who is the creditor, becomes personal. At the top of this global pyramid, no single face is to blame. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them and us. Modern finance has turned debt into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens depend on it. The line between debt and credit is now blurred. Debt once meant slavery. Today it means balance, but if that balance breaks, trust shatters, dreams end, and we remember what debt really is, a promise that can never be fully repaid. If this gave you a new perspective, like the video and hit subscribe.